Good to go. It's 11 o'clock.
Good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock, so we'll make a start. I declare the council meeting C22 bar 2 open and welcome everyone here. I think we're all here apart from Andy Wickers, who may be on Zoom. Can you confirm, Holloway, if Andy is on Zoom?
No one's on Zoom.
He's not. Okay, so an apology from Andy Wickers. I'll call for a mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Crawford, Councillor Henry. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Consideration of late items. There aren't any. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? No. Okay. There are no public excluded items. So we'll move straight to public forum where we have Mr. Travis talking about speed limits and Fairview Estate. If you would, sir. Thank you. Bruce Devonport.
Forgive me if I don't quite get things right.
No worries. It can be a difficult challenge.
Keep on.
Yeah.
It's on. That's it working. As a resident of the area that we're in, what we're requesting is for it to be recognised as a rather built up area, a lot more than just a normal rural street now that is a subdivision that holds quite a number of people. The petition has been presented in the interest of health and safety for all the residents and visitors who use the public roads to access their homes and to the facilities associated with Fairview Estate, which is the public road part of the group, Fairview Park, Arran Drive, which are privately owned roads, and the Fairview Country Club. In saying that it is also open to the public. What we have at the moment is an area that the longest street we have in the area is less than 1 kilometre long, but it has a speed limit of 100 kilometres per hour. Not saying that it is physically possible to do, but we feel this is quite an insane situation that we have to deal with. And we'd like to present a petition that we've had signed by 263 of the members of the area to bring an enforceable speed limit, if possible, down to something quite reasonable, more than the lines of 30 kilometres per hour to suit the area. We've presented some bullet points here that we think that are relevant, and considering that the establishment of the community's been there for probably 24 years or plus, it's something that has been just been neglected. It's not something that, you know, we're bringing to light now. We've already tried once before over the last 6 months to get something to the community board to get it presented so we can get something gazetted. We're hoping that this will prompt that action and get it through a bit quicker. The residents that are there now are going to increase. We've got in the process of another 25 home residents being built presently, and it's going to increase as the time goes on. It's the demographic. It's not a retirement village. We've got people from the age of 5 years of age through to 90 years of age. And the majority of the area is occupied by people who are retired, or we've got ex-veterans, people who are, you know, in the what a nice quiet area to live in and be safe in that area. I guess when you look at the whole thing, we've got developments in the area, including Seeker now, which are increasing the load of their ability to have people come and work for them. So they're in the process of developing a 250 bedroom lodge across the road, directly across the road from the club. That is also going to need access on the road from the main highway, State Highway 2, onto Sharp Road. we've had that road re-looked at just recently, I believe, was brought down from 100 kilometres an hour to 80 kilometres an hour, which then increases how ludicrous it is to go from 80 again to 100 kilometres an hour in our area. If it's possible at all to be considered, we feel that it would be suitable to bring Sharp Road down to 50, just on that area from the main State Highway 2 through to Glen Eagles Drive, which is the entrance to Fairview Estate. In the interim, it's because of the amount of volume we think there's going to be in the future. You know, it's going to increase all the time. And I think if it's tabled now, if we can get it gazetted, if we can get a proper control of the speed limits in the area, even brought down to just a safer, acceptable speed limit, would be really, really good for the whole community as a whole. So we're hoping that by tabling this and presenting this petition, 263 people have signed it, and most of them are requesting 30 kilometres an hour. Some of them have requested something different, but we feel it's a good balance. It reflects the amount of people that are in the area and how they feel about how dangerous it is actually for the streets they live in at the moment. Thank you. Thank you.
I could go to questions, but I think it's perhaps worth if Emily responds to some of those points raised there. Perhaps I'll just start off though. My understanding was that although it was 100 kilometres an hour, in the last speed review we changed it to 50 as part of an urban area. So perhaps Emily, can you comment on that?
Thank you, Mayor James. As council, we went through a speed limit review process in 2020. As council is aware, we went through a speed limit review process in 2020/2021, and the direction of the policy committee was to do a partial review. Through that process, my recollection is that Fairview Estate remained deregulated, but at the moment we've had some change in legislation, which means that bylaws are no longer going to be the method to determine speed limits. And as part of transitioning our speed limits into this national new system, there's been some matters that are being attended to. And did you want to speak to that, Gary?
Sure. And as part of the transition process, we've had some corrections that we've been able to undertake through Waka Kotahi process. And these are just where there's, I guess, speed limits that were really out of kilter or didn't quite match between our bylaw and where the signs were on the roads. And as part of that process, the speed limit for Fairview Estate has been dropped to 50 kilometres an hour. So where previously it was an open road speed limit, it's now 50 kilometres an hour in Fairview Estate. Appreciate it's not the previous 20 that was there when it was private, but 50 is better than 100 for the estate.
Right. So could we have that reposted as that speed limit, please? And I believe that is it yet to be gazetted so that it is an enforceable speed limit? It is. Okay, thank you.
If I may add, Mayor James, next year we will be required to participate in the regional land transport planning process, which is to review speed limits across the district as well. So there is another opportunity there for that speed limit to be reconsidered too.
Right, that's excellent.
Did anyone have a question? Councillor Murray Benj.
Is it because you're not a retirement village that you have to have a separate speed system? For example, in a retirement village, you determine what the speed limit will be and nobody else can.
Yes, that is correct. It's a standard subdivision, public road. This was passed on to council some 2015 or something like that. That then it automatically, because it was a rural area, got posted with 100 kilometres per hour without forethought of what it is. It had been intended in the past, I believe, to be a closed gate retirement village, which the developers failed at. So when the new developers finally took it all over, which include the country club and the other privately owned roads in the area, they no longer wished to be involved in that area. So they passed it off into the public system. It's a standard subdivision, normal subdivision. It's not classed as urban, it's still classed as rural.
Any further questions? Councillor Joyce.
Just a quick one. You've got point 1, point 2. Did the petition cover both points? Because you've only got the petition covering point 1 and what you've written here.
Then the initial petition was for Fairview Estate is what we did was we went across the whole demographic. We went through all parts of that development. We went through the club, everybody that was involved with the golf club, everybody that used the facility.
Right.
And we asked them, would they be prepared to put towards the petition? So in the petition signings, you'll find the addresses of the people who are not in Fairview Estate, but are in the other areas like Fairview Park or Aaron Drive.
But the petition itself relates to point 1, which is.
Point 1
Yeah,
initially,
okay,
yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the only question I actually had was for staff. What signposts are there at the moment? Are we signposted as 30, as 20, as 50? Or you live there, you might be able to answer.
At the present, on our Fairview Estate, we only have a recommended community speed limit of 35 being shown, which was very generously given to us to put up.
But it's not enforceable.
It's not enforceable, all right, being what it is. We were a bit vague as to what actually was the legally enforceable speed limit for the area. There was a 50-kilometre sign put there at one stage when they realised that, you know, something needed to be done, but that was not at that stage, we believed, when it was done to be of a proper legally enforceable speed limit. So I don't know where we will go with the new installation of the sign. I believe that's maybe what you will settle on, which for us is a bonus still, because it's it's half of what it has been. Yeah. I mean, to be realistic, the community would appreciate it if it was brought down lower. So a recommended speed limit is still applicable. We're quite happy with that, but by all means, if we get those 50K signs up
Sounds like we need to tidy the signage.
Yeah.
Well, I think the signage is there already from what I can tell.
Well, is it?
we've got nothing apart from the community speed limit.
Yeah, so we can't, that's unofficial signage is there, which is probably
Unofficial.
doing the job as best it can at the moment. But beyond that, I don't think there's much more there. But I think the key takeaway here is that over the next 18 months, there'll be the speed management review, which is a different process to the bylaw process. And there is there'll be guidelines from Waka Kotahi on what's the appropriate speed. I think, and I'm looking at Gary here, it'll probably be 30 or 40 for residential areas like that. And but we'll see where we land.
Very good, thank you.
Councillor Murray-Benj.
So I'm just asking if, for example, Waka Kotahi, they have temporary speed limit signs and they don't seem to have to get approval from anybody and they pop them up everywhere. Is it possible, and I know, sir, that we can't make a decision today, it gets referred to staff, but maybe staff could consider doing temporary signs until the formal system takes place?
Carrie.
Doesn't need a reply.
Yeah, good question. So I'm just checking the timing of when the 50s are going up. So the 50s are, it's a legitimate speed limit now. They will go up. The question I've got for you would be, do you still want the 35 advisory signs as well?
No, I think that would be too confusing for too many people. I think
Okay.
if you settle on something and stick to it,
Yep.
we're happy with the notification of a enforceable.
Okay. So we'll just replace the 35s with the 50s.
Please, thank you.
Okay. I think I had a question, so thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks
Mr.
for your
Davenport,
time and
Mr. Travis. Sorry,
Thank you for the time and the opportunity.
thank you, pleasure.
Thank you to Councillor Sol for arranging it.
Okay.
Who would we give this to? Al?
Do you want to, if I like to receive the the petition, I'll be
Yes.
happy to do that. Okay, so moving on to the agenda proper. We have on page 7 the report on communities for local democracy or draft mail declaration. I'll ask our CEO, John Hollyoake, to start, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Obviously take the paper as read. I think I just wanted to make one particular comment before you considered the recommendations. Whether you do decide to accept joining organisations or not, I just want to make sure that we're doing that eyes wide open in terms of our being fiscally prudent as well. So when I read, it's very difficult when I read particularly the Merrill Declaration to disagree with any of the principles or what they are trying to achieve. I'm personally just unsure about how some of those arrangements would work. And in particular, I'm talking about it's not clear which councils would be excluded from the regional water organisations. It's likely, reading from the letter, that they will be the larger city councils, Christchurch and Auckland, maybe in what we know to be Entity B, Tauranga City, Hamilton, maybe New Plymouth. I don't know, I'm assuming, but I think there's some questions there about who would be included and who wouldn't. And I think it's important to understand that, because the declaration considers setting up these regional water organisations, which I guess are akin to a smaller entity. If that is the case, then they're obviously going to have less financial capability in terms of being able to borrow money from the Crown, if that is the solution that comes through. So if you do make the decision to join, I would be suggesting that alongside any decision, that we are very transparent about some of those questions, and ensure that they are considerations for as we move forward. I don't think anyone's going to have the answers to those questions today, but I think it would be a good process for us to just raise some things, and you might want to talk about what those things are for considerations as we move forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So I'll open up the floor for questions of staff on this, and then we can go into. I'll call for mover and second and so on. So, are there any questions on the report? Councillor Joyce.
Always questions. When we say an option A pursues, would that, and because there's a lot of, first of all, thank you, Rachel, for doing this very, very quickly and very thoroughly. When we say pursues, does that imply that it will come back to the council for a vote once those questions that John and obviously Rachel and her report have raised, before we formally would join? Because I mean, because this has been done at pace, and as you say, there's lots of unanswered questions. It would be good not to just say, okay, well, yeah, here's our membership, but actually let's complete our investigations, let's pursue it, but then bring it back to council for formalisation. I'm not sure how that process works.
Rachel.
Through you, Your Worship, that is correct. So that the choice of words was intentional, noting through the options assessment, there are still some questions or some due diligence that would need to be undertaken, particularly with the option of joining Communities for Local Democracy. So hence the reason why I have chosen the word pursue. In your hands, though.
Councillor Murray Benge.
I don't have any questions, sir. I'm just ready to debate the issue, because I think one of the things that staff have not answered is the terrible predicament that this council is under, and it will be wiped out.
I think we need to, that doesn't sound like a question. So.
Yes, I want to ask the question then, just decided. Sir, Rachel, if, for example, this goes through, our council is really up a creek without a paddle. We'll just be wiped out, won't we? The way it's heading.
Your Worship, I'm not too sure that I understand the question, Councillor Murray Benge. Are you meaning if the bill receives royal assent, which is planned for this week?
Yes, if the bill receives assent, if we lose a third of our operations, and then this council becomes extremely vulnerable, and that with the review of local government taking place as well, we are in serious predicament of survival.
I think that's more of a political question rather than a one for staff. I don't think that is the case, and if it were, then there'd be plenty more councils who'd be more vulnerable than we were. But I don't think that's a fair assessment at this point. Right, so are there any questions from elected members? No. Okay. So what I'll do, I'm going to take this in parts. So I'll call for a mover and seconder for recommendations 1 and 2, which is to receive the report and that it relates to an issue of medium significance. So moved Councillor Joyce, seconded Councillor Sol. Any debate? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So then we'll do recommendations 3 and 4, or potentially a different one, separately. Okay. So recommendation 3, the council approves in principle / does not approve the draft Communities for Local Democracy draft mayoral declaration included as attachment 1 to this report. So I'll call for a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Joyce, Councillor Murray Benge. Approves, yes. I gathered that. So yes. So Councillor Joyce, just speak to your resolution, please.
This has been widely canvassed and going back a couple of years. We have an issue here that needs addressing, and the mayoral declaration does cover that off in terms of the regulation of water has not been ideal. And so that's now in place. And there are certainly changes needed for many councils around, particularly the tiny councils that are struggling with their own 3 waters. We've been consistently told that this council has done it well at some expense. And there's never really been a compelling idea put forward for the reforms as they are now. I think we had a situation where we were told that other alternatives would be looked at, and then those were locked out. So I think we need to get this issue, and it is a genuine issue, and many things have been done right in terms of this issue, back on the table for discussion. And one way to do that is to back this mayoral declaration. Do we all have all the answers at the moment? No, but I think the current process has been very much driven from the start by the private sector. The 2017 report that was done by the private sector group. We need to have a situation where more people are on board with this. These 3 waters are very important to our residents, and we need to make sure as a nation that we're all on board with this. And I think at the moment, it's very, very clear that people are looking for alternatives, and we should be asking the government to look more broadly with what's going on, without ignoring the fact there is an issue. I mean, I have a friend who's a Balclutha district councillor, and that's screwed. 12 small communities scattered all over the bottom of the South Island, and they can't do it by themselves. But what this process did was actually bring together the Otago and Southland councils into a regional water proposal. It wasn't finalised. Hawke's Bay, which is, as we know, Havelock North. They were looking, pushed by the government in a good way, they were looking at combining, and I understand, and people around this table know more than me, that the Bay of Plenty was edging towards something similar. So I think there are alternatives, and I think this mayoral declaration is a good way of pushing that case, that there are alternatives that need to be looked at.
Thank you. Councillor Murray Benge.
So I'm grateful that you have brought your mayoral declaration to this meeting. I think that shows good leadership. I disagree with Councillor Joyce. This issue has been on our books for the last term at least, and it's suddenly not 3 waters, it's suddenly 5 waters. And know that the whole of the water system is, we heard the argument, no one owns the water. But suddenly it has been transferred over to these huge entities that are tribal dominated, and it's just so undemocratic. I think we deserve to have a place at the table. I've spoken to Dan Gordon, the mayor of Waimakariri, and he is one of the ones that has been in the leadership role in bringing the councils together. There are certainly more mayors who are in favour of working with the political parties that are in Parliament to make sure that local government is fairly represented. I said before, sir, that if this goes through and we do nothing, then all I know is that having had the experience of it before, we will just be walked over and will be regionalised, and the public out there who are our ratepayers, who are so uptight about this issue, will have no say whatsoever in a bigger conglomerate. So I am firmly delighted that at last we've got something sensible in front of us. I disagree with staff. It doesn't require any further work because they're going to be working on review of local government, and the issues just keep rolling on, and they will have to actually keep with it as well. But from our point of view, from a political point of view, as elected representatives, it's time we joined the organisation that has the community at heart, and that we support it and make sure that our mayor joins the mayoral forum and has some influence there as well. So I'm grateful to you, sir. I just think it's time for this council to stand up and be counted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sutton. Oh, no, Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, basically, I've got to follow in with the same comments here. I am very concerned as to how we've arrived at all this situation. And when it's so clear that our communities are extremely concerned, and we can't say that they're not well informed, because they're as well informed as probably we are in many ways, or have been over the whole period, and they see the traps. So to me, we needed another voice. We need somebody that's working more for our communities and the people to create other options, or put out other options than what we've had. So I strongly support us following through this system. And frankly, I guess when it comes, I really support just getting on with joining them. But thank you for what you've put forward as well, and we'll support it.
Thank you. I'll just remind members this motion here is for the mayoral declaration, not CFRLD. But Councillor Coxhead.
I fully support the signing of this declaration as well. And whether we have all the facts at this point or not, I see it as the first step in our journey. And to date, everything's been focused on Three Waters, and rightly so. But of course, we have a lot further to go with this journey of reform. So I fully support you signing this, or we signing this. Thank you.
Any further speakers? Councillor Crawford.
So on my journey in this, I've been trying to find out has Local Government New Zealand failed us in this journey versus why this other organisation has risen up. So nobody's talked about that yet. So I think that's something that, you know, we have to be in the conversation, because we already do have a body that's representing, called Local Government New Zealand. And I've tried to canvass, you know, by talking to the guy at top and some others who have been around the table for a while, to see where they've failed, and you know, in the environment that was given to them, how they should respond. So so I'm sort of I'm in two minds about whether, you know, a group like this group could make any difference, will have effect or not. I'm still not convinced, so I'm not sure.
Councillor Thwaites.
Thank you. I will be supporting recommendation 3 as put forward. If consistency is part of it, from day one, I've claimed, which is included in the declaration, that stormwater should remain in control of the councils, whichever format they end up merging. I see that as a key part of it. I believe aggregation should only apply to the 2 waters, the capital intensive waters. So I definitely fully support the declaration as written, and I will be supporting our council joining that, mainly on that basis. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll say my piece. I'm happy to support the principles as expressed in the mayoral declaration. They are entirely unobjectionable. However, I will be writing a covering letter and seeking clarification on some of the issues, particularly around the funding model, and expressing concern about whether the principles can be mutually achieved. It's not unsurprising that, Three Waters is a vast and complex topic, and a one-pager is not going to give us all the answers. So that is my intention. Otherwise, I'll be voting in support. So if there's no other questions, did you want to write a reply, Councillor Joyce? No. Okay, I'll put the motion for recommendation 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So move on to recommendation 4. I don't think we normally note that kind of thing, but just carried.
Yes.
Recommendation 4, that council pursues or does not pursue formal membership of Communities for Local Democracy. Councillor Granger.
Thank you, Your Worship. I should like to move an amendment to replace the wording that is currently there with that council approves in principle membership of Communities for Local Democracy, subject to due diligence by staff to clarify conditions of membership, future financial commitments, future plans, and any queries with governance arrangements. And the point of that is to just make it a little tighter than pursues, because you can pursue something for a long time and never catch it. I would like to catch it and formalise the fact that we actually do join.
So could you just repeat what you're recommending, what your motion?
That council approves in principle membership of Communities for Local Democracy, subject to due diligence by staff to clarify conditions of membership, future financial commitments, future plans, and any queries with governance arrangements.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Joyce. Are there any questions? No. So I'll invite you to speak to your motion.
Never before in parliamentary history of our nation have we seen such blatant disregard for the will of the people and for the due process of lawmaking as that which we have witnessed with the government's handling of the Water Services Entity Act 2022. What began as the removal of 3 waters from local council control has now morphed into at least 5 waters with coastal and geothermal water added. How centralised control of coastal and geothermal waters would have prevented the Havelock North drinking water problem is a mystery well beyond my pay grade. And we in local government are bound by law to undertake consultation for any major change, and yet the government was able to ignore the vast majority of the 88,000 submissions on the Water Services Entity Bill. And it does not seem to stop with 5 waters. Section 227 of the Act amends the Water Services Act 2021 to change the interpretation of Te Mana o Te Wai. And it says in this Act, Te Mana o Te Wai has the meaning set out in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and applies for the purposes of this Act to water as that term is defined in the RMA. And it's quite clear from the definition of Te Mana o Te Wai in 1.3 of the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management 2020 that it applies to fresh water. The clue is in the name, the National Policy for Fresh Water Management. However, the RMA and the Replacement Natural and Built Environments Bill defines water as water means water in all its physical forms, whether flowing or not, whether over or under the ground, includes fresh water, coastal water, and geothermal water, and does not include any water in any form while in any pipe, tank, or system. Scientifically speaking, coastal water and geothermal water cannot be called fresh water. I certainly wouldn't drink either. And the addition of subsection B referencing the RMA will have far-reaching consequences. So what began as a flawed attempt to fix some localized issues with drinking water, stormwater and sewage has now morphed into water in all its physical forms, whether flowing or not, whether over or under the ground. So that's everything from clouds, rain, hail, sleet, fog, steam, glaciers, rivers, lakes, streams, creeks, aquifers, wetlands, harbours and coastal waters, farm ponds, municipal and domestic swimming pools, and so on. Probably even the steam on your morning coffee. All of those things are subject to Te Mana o Te Wai statements, which the water entities have to give effect to. It is Mission Creek gone berserk, sir. And curiously, water as defined in section 227 does not include any water in any form while in any pipe or tank. And since most of Council's Three Waters spends a significant time of the cycle of use in a pipe or a tank, it's a very, very strange exception. Many of us around this table have campaigned on our opposition to what was then the proposed government water reforms, and we would not be representing our constituents who put us around this table if we're not prepared to stand up for what we believe and for what they want, especially given the rapid mission creep that we have seen over the last few weeks. And while I accept that the government has already passed this contradictory nonsense into law, it is important that our council's voice is heard. C4LD now has the support of mayors who collectively represent nearly 4 million New Zealand residents. I've spoken with Mayor Wareboys, and I have been informed that no joining fee is required from council to sign the MOU. And that's not to say there will never be a call for funds in the future, should there be a need for marketing or lobbying arise. And if that were the case, then that request would go back to all member councils for approval. Turning now to the disadvantages outlined in the paper, and I realise that this new information was not available when the paper was prepared, but I want to go through the various disadvantages that were listed. Firstly, principles included in the declaration, while laudable, appear incompatible with each other, Principle 2 versus Principle 4, and perhaps difficult to achieve contemporaneously. Local ownership, control and accountability, Principle 2, does not conflict with regional cooperation, Principle 4. We already do that with the Omokara sewage and the TCC water supply. Number 2, noting the expiry of the MOU process, the C4LD membership pathway and financial commitment is unclear. As I've said, there's no cost and staff can work through any membership pathway issues. Number 3, there's likely to be a cost for C4LD membership. Well, there's none at present. 4, it's unclear what council's cost contribution would be used for and what ongoing cost commitment may be required from council. As I've said, no cost, so there's no issue on what the funds will be used for, and any future council commitment will be brought back to council. Number 5, the risk of criticism for committing ratepayer funds to an organisation with an uncertain purpose and term. No funds, so no risk. Number 6, with the bill becoming law, it is unclear what C4LD's purpose becomes. Similarly, it is unclear how long C4LD endures and how or when it winds up. The C4LD approach remains that councils work together with government to find an enduring model to solve the issues, as there are far too many unanswered questions in the current model. Number 7, joining C4LD would mean council has only one vote and may be constrained by the collective position. I assume that applies to any organisation council joins. Number 8, C4LD membership may be seen to undermine the partnership with government realised through smart growth. My suggestion, sir, is that this is a strawman argument, as there has been no ramifications for smart growth from council's previous letters of opposition. Number 9, C4LD governance arrangements are not well defined. Well, they do seem to be spelled out in section 4 of the MOU, but if they need to be improved, then council, the staff can advise council on this matter. And number 10, notwithstanding that the MOU process has expired, it is reasonable to assume new member councils would need to honour it. There may be implications for council if it were to breach the terms of the MOU, such as a loss of trust or impact on reputation. And I'm not sure here why council would breach the terms of the MOU. So, sir, the previous council was not prepared to stand up for the people of our district on this matter. And having dealt with all the reported disadvantages, I trust that these recommendations will have the support of the majority of this council who do want to put the interests of our community first. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Granger. Are there any further speakers for or against? Councillor Murray-Bedge.
I'm reluctant to vote for the amendment because, and yet Councillor Granger has highlighted the big advantages of including our staff all the way. But what I find about the organisation of the combined councils is that it's the first time, sir, that we've had a bottom up of councils looking to the future as to what is good for local government and how we can work with central government and the political parties that are out there so that come the election, we know what we are getting. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You had Hastings, this argument that they had this water problem. They spent $80 million fixing it. Nobody's given them credit for that. But that's the reality. Local government does its own thing and does it well in the majority of cases. I acknowledge Balclutha. Balclutha was the one that let its city care look after its sewage schemes and stuff them all up. So it had a problem before it actually got to this. But the one thing that we need, sir, is working with central government who take taxation from people. And when we went to Makatū, this council did not have the money to actually provide a sewage scheme for Makatū. We went to the government through internal affairs. We got a grant of either 10 or $12 million, and we were able to provide a sewage system for that community that would not have happened otherwise. And that was council and local government working together. We absolutely have to have a policy where local government is in agreement as to what it wants from central government, instead of waiting for them to dump on us, which they do far too regularly. So I'm fully in favour of actually joining the organisation. And so long as this amendment doesn't slow that process down, then I'll vote for it. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour.
Thank you, Medenya. I actually will not be supporting this motion. Given that the bill has been passed by the government, I don't believe that joining C4LD will have much impact on central government. This government showed just last night how they were prepared to push a bill through Parliament that while it well may have had laudable goals, they were pursuing really impractical ways of achieving them. And I believe that's clearly shown in more than one instance. The most likely way to achieve significant change in how this proposal has come and is to be implemented is through a change of government, change of central government, given that a number of parties have indicated that they will be repealing the legislation. Further, I'd like to say that assertions that LGNZ has failed us don't really stand scrutiny. Significantly, central government has failed local government New Zealand. If they're not prepared to listen to local government New Zealand approaches, claims, offers to work to identify the issues with our water supply systems, then I don't believe there's much likelihood they'll be prepared to listen to C4LD. So while I accept that the motion as it stands is only in principle, I will not be supporting it.
Councillor Coxhead.
I will be supporting joining C4LD. I don't agree that doing nothing's an option or a preferable option. I believe that bad things happen because good people do nothing.
Councillor Henry.
I will be supporting the motion because I think that we've been shown a raw deal. You know, the way that we have been carried through this process has been shocking. And our people are confused, and I'm sure that a lot of us are not really clear on actually what we're going to end up with. So because of that is how I'm feeling, and that's how a lot of the constituents I talk to are feeling. I will be supporting it, and I do hear what our CEO has said, that the provision to actually pursue the questions that staff have, I think is very valid and should be given the option to do so, which is clearly stated in the amendment that Councillor Granger has put forward.
Councillor Joyce.
So there's a number of issues been raised. I think one thing we can all agree is it's been a really chaotic and constantly changing process from our government. Yeah, they keep changing their minds, changing the approach and around the edges. But yeah, the recent screw up, shall we say, over entrenchment is just symptomatic. I think we also need to look to the fact that this is a model that has been picked up from overseas. You know, they say it's based on Scottish Water, but there are two big issues with that. One is that Scottish Water is incredibly unpopular in Scotland. And in fact, the number of sewage spills in Scotland have gone up under Scottish Water, according to the BBC and news reports. And that's partly to do with the fact that Scottish Water turned itself into a commissioning agency and went with big business. And there's opportunities, the way the legislation is written in New Zealand, for the same thing to happen here. Yeah, the companies that will make the most out of this are the big French companies like Suez, who want long-term big contracts, and that's why they want size. The issue with that, of course, is that big companies work to contracts. And while we know the current system is not perfect, at least if someone rings their local council and says this is happening and I'm not happy about it, they're more likely to get a response. What's happened in Scotland, apparently, is the big companies say, well, that's outside the contract. And we know with some of the roading issues that has happened a bit closer to home too. The second issue, and it was pointed out by a financial expert who did a bit of investigation, the big difference between what's happened in Scotland and what they plan to do here is that they plan to load up these new big entities with a lot of debt, 5 to 6 times equity. And whereas in Scotland, the government's put a lot more money into running the system. So these entities are being set up in a fiscally more risky manner than the model that we're being told has worked so well overseas. I do take issue, Councillor Scrimgeour, with your idea that the thing is done and dusted. This is a live issue. One bill has been passed, 2 more are still to go. Yes, we have an election next year, and probably the real answer for change may well be that election. But here's the thing about C4LD. They're looking beyond no. It's easy to say no, and a number of us have said no this morning. But they're also looking at what the alternatives are and what next, and I find that quite positive. They are looking for answers, not just rejecting the status quo. And lastly, as Councillor Granger has said, that whenever we join an organisation, we subsume some of our independence into that organisation, whether it be LGNZ or a financing company or a joint procurement company. We've done all those things. But I've come back to Rachel's I've no problem with what you've written. I think you've done very well in a very short period of time. But your very last point, or towards the end anyway, when we talk about the do nothing option, and one of the disadvantages in the report says, we are likely to be less persuasive as an advocate being one council as opposed to a coalition of councils. And that is, a lot of you have been around longer than me, but that seems to have been the case already. We haven't really had our voice heard. So I think it's time we joined a community of like-minded councils and tried to get our voice heard on the plan going forward, as well as, talking about the issues with the current plan.
Councillor Daly.
Yep, I was one who voted against this 12 months ago. I must admit I was wavering at the time. In the end, decided to vote against joining C4LD. simply because I thought the government was forging ahead and it wasn't really going to make much difference what we had to say or what C4LD was likely to achieve. So over the course of this past 12 months, we've seen the government push this through. They've gone through the listening process. The governance accountability group came up with some recommendations. Still, the issues that I've been hearing from the community that haven't really been addressed, I don't think, are the privatisation issue and obviously loss of local voice, and even this entrenchment clause, which was a clumsy attempt, I guess, to entrench Three Waters and protect it from privatisation, probably would have been a very good protection mechanism, to be honest, but obviously it wasn't constitutional, and that was pointed out. And councils have their shareholdings, which, as we've found out, don't really amount to much if a future government can just come in and change the legislation and decide to legislate to change the rules once again. And the 4 entities that are being established at the moment do lend themselves to being sold off in a asset grab or an asset sale as things get tough, and we are leading into a recessionary period. We keep getting told, the lady from Burl just told us last week that the reason there aren't any big private companies in New Zealand is because once they get to a certain size, they get sold to overseas investment companies. And we've just seen Wayne Brown suggesting that they sell their shares in the airport. And I wonder if Three Waters hadn't been going through, would he be considering selling Watercare to the highest bidder? He would certainly get a much bigger return than Three Waters reform is offering. So I can't even...
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I think that's unfair to make that statement about Mayor Brown. He's got no justification for saying it, and it's not fair when he's not here to defend himself.
Would you like me to retract that? Or...
Could you repeat what you said? I was momentarily distracted.
Okay, my point is that any mayor or council with the right with a attitude of trying to balance the books could potentially sell off their water assets themselves, especially if it had already been set up into a big CCA like Watercare in Auckland. And I know, and the Three Waters reform probably protects against that, but so my position I've come to is that I actually support the mayoral declaration. We just passed that, and I support the principles of C4LD. I think smaller regional entities are the way forward. It will retain that local voice. It will give more protection against privatisation. And as to the potential change of government, I've had a one-to-one with Christopher Luxon in Te Puke, and he's assured me that if they become government, they will come and talk to all the councils and see what the councils want. I didn't get the impression that National and ACT have got a viable proposal as yet. I think C4LD and the councils, the ones that operate well anyway, are the experts on the ground at the moment. And I think coming up with a proposal to give to National and ACT if they become the government, which is becoming increasingly clear that may be the case, I think is a pretty good starting point for us to be pursuing. And so I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for or against? Councillor Sol.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I think the first thing I want to sort of put out there again is C4LD. councils for local democracy. For goodness sake, start looking at that and remembering it's not necessarily a one-trick pony purely on water, but that may have been where it started. I don't believe it's where it will stop. I also take on very strongly the fact that history is littered with situations where we have rolled over, or people have rolled over, and because it was a foregone conclusion, because people had the clout, be it like local central government with the numbers in their chamber, or be it that they had the armies to enforce things, that's what's going to happen, full stop. And it may well be. But I believe we have an obligation also to our ratepayers, to our people, to support them who do not want to roll over and have this happen. And that is really the biggest thing to me, is that I don't believe what's before us is the only option. I believe that C4LD are working on other options, trying to get some other consensus to make more sense of this whole thing, to maintain our assets for local people to have at least some sort of local input. And so I will be voting for the motion.
Any further speakers? Councillor Cox.
I just wanted to make the point about the entrenchment clause. I can't remember who said it. It was to avoid privatisation. It was primarily initially introduced to ensure that it couldn't be repealed by a future government.
Any more speakers? Okay, I'll sorry, Councillor Crawford.
So if we do go the way that Councillor Granger has proposed, that there'd be some more due diligence done on that. I guess in my mind, I was thinking that, you know, people who work in the space who have expertise at this and a bit more, you know, knowledgeable, hopefully within council, that, you know, is that how it would play out, that people within council who work within that space would look into it, you know, who would do the due diligence? And
well, I think it's perhaps just confirming what Councillor Granger found out from his own due diligence, and just maybe a few other issues, but that's the sort of thing I would expect to be confirmed.
Okay, so the why I'm saying that is that if there's still more options for exploring this to see how well it is to join this group, to, you know, warrant not only, you know, in principle, which is fine, there's no monetary involvement, but if it does come to the point where we pay that $15,000 to $20,000 fee, I'm just thinking about, you know, trying to head to Swanee where this is worthwhile to join, and then if we pay that, you know, spending ratepayers' money, you know, whether it's justifiable. So personally for me, in principle, I'd mostly be supportive, but it'll be based on that there'd be, you know, more investigation, and that, you know, they would convince me that, you know, I can vote on it on behalf of, you know, my ratepayers than my own personal preference. So you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, we get elected, we come in here and represent our community, but we don't hold the expertise on this. And, you know, we're required to try and, you know, sort of say, is this warranted or not? And again, I posed a question about, you know, and I agree with John a little bit, with Councillor Scrimgeour, that, you know, in the work that a body that we're already a member of have been working is whether that they significantly let us down, or they've had to really work it, you know, with central government the way they're operating, and that whether this group now or into the future will make any difference. I'd still like to know more. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I offer Murray his right to reply, I'll explain my views on this. The ability of C4LD to achieve its aims remains uncertain, but the reasons for my early reluctance to join appear to have waned, particularly the joining fee and other issues. So I'm happy for staff to confirm the conditions for joining, which Councillor Granger has partially explored. I do want to pick up on one or 2 points which some people have mentioned. Councillor Joyce mentioned about the continually changing reforms. Actually, I'd say the opposite. Central government's been remarkably steadfast in not changing in the face of quite significant opposition. So well, you can view that as a positive or negative, but that's what my observation. And I'd also like to observe that a practicable alternative is yet to emerge. And that involves the trade-offs, a true look at the trade-offs involved in Three Water reform. And I think the view of some that it's just a question of central government not having picked the a good option or the deliberately picked poor options or something is a bit unfair or not correct. There are trade-offs in Three Water reform. You can't have everything you want, and that's unfortunately what central government will have to deal with. So, as I said, I'm happy to support membership, given the changes over the last year. And Councillor Granger, did you want to have a right to reply?
Like Councillor Joyce, I take issue with Councillor Scrimmage's conclusion that it's a done deal. It appears that way on the surface, but the current bill, which has gone through this week, amended a bill that was put through last year. There are more bills to come, and who's to say that the next bill doesn't amend this bill? They're changing the tack and changing their tune as often as some of us change. Well, never mind. And the other comment, sir, that you made was that there's been assertions that LGNZ has failed us. Nowhere at all in my motion or in my statement to that did I make any such assertion. So the point is with CFRLD that we have a central body that is willing to lobby and with the power to influence, hopefully, the media when it does come to election year. And I think that's a really good body to be part of if they are striving to get a better outcome for the residents of New Zealand in the Three Water space. And so I commend my motion, sir.
Thank you. So I'll now put the motion. So the new recommendation 4 that Councillor Granger put forward. Does anyone want me to repeat the resolution? Yes? Okay, so it was the council approves in principle membership of C4LD subject to due diligence by staff to clarify conditions of membership, future financial commitments, future plans, and any queries with governance arrangements. So with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to page 43, appointment of local recovery manager. I'm hoping this won't take an hour as well. So, are there any questions on this for staff? 43. So no questions. I shall call for a mover and seconder, please, for the recommendations. Councillor Granger, Councillor Sol, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to page 46, Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum Triennial Agreement 2022-25. This basically says that all the mayors in the all the councils in the Bay will play nicely with each other. Were there any questions? No, in which case I'll call for a mover and seconder. Councillor Sol, Deputy Mayor Scrimger. Any debate? No. Oh, Councillor Mowbench.
Just a request, sir, that you keep us well informed.
Of course. In which case I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to page 59, making district plan changes 93 and 94 operative. Perhaps I just hand to Rachel. Oh. Yeah. Is it what? Is there anything that staff want to say to introduce this, or Is everyone comfortable with that?
Your Worship, I'm just going to introduce my colleague to my right and my colleague to her far right. I know that you already know Anna Price. She's a senior planner with the organisation and has been for some time. And to my right is Abby Mark, who you may not have met before. She is a policy analyst in our environmental planning team, reporting directly to Natalie, and has authored these reports. Is there anything you want to say about these reports, Abby?
Nothing in particular other than it's just following through on our statutory requirements to make the plan changes operative. Plan change 93 and 94. So that's to Puna Springs and the Washer Road Business Park.
Any questions of staff? There being none, I'll call for a mover and seconder for the recommendations. Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, Councillor Thwaites, any points you want to make?
I'd just like to thank Anna in particular for her work in helping guide us through these plan changes. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Moving on to page 69. And this is the Chief Executive Employment Subcommittee. And I'll just note right up front, there is an error in the quorum for that committee. It should be 2 rather than 3, being 50% of an even number. Councillor Murray Benge.
Happy to move the recommendation, sir.
Happy, Councillor Sol, seconded. Thank you. I'll put the motion if there's no debate. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Page 74, the contract for Proll Road urbanisation tender. Gary, did you want to say anything about this?
Probably what I'd say, Mr. Mayor, is that as per our normal procurement procedures, this has gone through an extremely thorough process, full probity audit, which has been signed off, and the contract is at the negotiation stage. But in terms of timing, with the timing of the council meetings, we need to pass this. We need this resolution to continue with those negotiations and let the contract in time for a February start.
Councillor Murray Benge.
Happy to support the recommendations, Mr. Chairman, but could just ask Mr. Ellis, when do we know whether the Transport Agency will come in with its subsidy? And if it doesn't, what are the consequences?
Okay, so the budgets as they are at the moment do not include any subsidy. So for our structure plan works, we never include subsidy until if and when that is approved, because we have a business case process to go through. In terms of timing, that will be in the first half of next year. So we're still progressing the project at the same time as we're progressing the business case process with Waka Kotahi. But as I said, the budgets we've got at the moment are sufficient to undertake the project. If we get the subsidy, then that provides a benefit to our funding sources.
Mr. Mayor, could I just ask you, in your experience, Mr. Ellis, how often have we been successful with this sort of work from the Transport Agency? Are they getting more difficult, or are they, as they used to be, reasonable?
They have a clear process that they require us to follow, business case process, and they have staff involved in that. So we work through a business case process. Our focus has been on Proll Road because we may need to change the cross section slightly on the top surface to meet the funding requirements for multimodal walking and cycling, and that is why we're also in the contract negotiation phase. At this stage, we've been successful. So we've had 2 sections of Mokoro Road. Same process was followed. We were successful with obtaining subsidy. So you follow the process. The projects are in the regional land transport plan as what's called a probable, which is also helps the success rate. So in this case, we've got some confidence, but until you go through the process, you can never guarantee it.
Councillor Thwaites.
Can I just ask what impact this will have on the financial model contributions to those developers down in that area? Does this have the effect of reducing?
If there's subsidy, that will reduce financial contributions, but as it is now, this is as the financial contributions are as per our current schedule. And this will be updated through the annual plan process. No, so for our annual plan, and we've got discussions next week on that, we're allowing for around a 10% cost increase for construction, and you saw that through the workshop that you had with Bill, and that's typically what's happening in the marketplace. So we're building that into the following year, and this contract goes over an 18-month period. So the financial contributions will apply for, I guess, 2 different tranches.
No further questions? Oh, Councillor Granger. Thank you. And is there a second? Councillor Henry. Is there any debate, discussion? There being none, I'll put the motion or recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So item 9, information receipt, there is none. Item 10, resolution to exclude the public as we move into the confidential section. I'll move that. Councillor Granger seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Against?